Hello, everybody. This is Baron B. Lee. I wanted to thank everybody that's been following me and anybody tuning in for the first time. Last week, I introduced everyone to my son, Eric Dragon Lee, and today I wanted to talk about some incidents that happened leading up to my shooting. One of the big news topics on the headlines today is Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Everyone's talking about the case and some of the things that are going on. For the most part, most people are supporting Johnny Depp. But what I wanted to do is tell a little bit of my story. There's some similarities to the case. And this isn't a rant session about things that happened to me. But this is more to bring awareness. There's thousands of men, fathers out there fighting for their children in similar situations that Johnny Depp is going through. Unfortunately, they don't have the millions of dollars to fight and have their voice heard. So if you can, follow my story and help me be that voice for them. I guess the first thing I want to talk about, people ask me all the time, oh, you got shot 9 times. That had to be pretty devastating. And the reality is the shooting was the least devastating of it all. It all started when my son was first taken from me, and let's go back in 2015. So my son was born in 2014, and by 2015 his mom and I separated. And what led up to that separation was for about 6 months, she was going through a real depression state, not taking care of herself, my son. It was very difficult to watch my son going through neglect, and so I made the choice to finally leave her, and I had made an attempt to try to take my son from her and leave the house. At that time, when we were going through that altercation, she started screaming and at the top of her voice, and the neighbors heard. And basically, when the police came, she told them that I was beating her up and beating my son up. All false allegations. The police did their investigation only to find out that there was nothing that showed that I had done any of the things she said. She had said I'd broken furniture. There was no broken furniture. And so I basically wanted to de-escalate the situation and had offered for her to take my son just to leave the house. I didn't want to have any more altercations with her. So the police said, that's fine. So she left, and a couple hours later, she actually came back. She came back with some friends, and I had already planned to leave her, so I had already changed the locks on the house, and she didn't realize it. But she tried to get back into the home. That's when she called the police because I wouldn't let her in. And I told the new police officers that showed up that what happened and why I didn't want her in the house. And she had told them that I was posting nude videos of her on Facebook and pictures of her on Facebook, and that she was trying to get her phone and some of her belongings and to prevent me from doing this. The police basically said that it was her house as well, and I couldn't lock her out, even though there was this domestic altercation that just happened prior to them arriving a couple hours earlier. The allegations are pretty severe. The cops obviously believed her right off the bat, and I'm a pretty logical man, so I just asked the cops. I said, hey, if I had done these type of things, can you show me the photos? Can you show me the videos? Can you show me the postings? And then they said, oh, she said that they already deleted. I said, okay, well then where was it posted? Which friend saw it? Can we call them up? Can we get someone who screenshotted any evidence that it actually happened? And obviously it didn't happen, so they couldn't find any information. The cops told me that I could go to jail for doing this type of stuff. I said, yeah, I understand. I hadn't done this. And basically they let her come in and grab all the stuff she wanted, and she left. And I thought that was the end of it. I was going to go to court and try and settle this, as far as a divorce and custody battle like normal people would. Instead, a week later, I came home and police knocked on my door. I was served with a protection order, a temporary protection order, with accusations from my ex-wife saying that I had abused her and abused my son. and that I was being forced out of my home. I was allowed to take the clothes on my back and a couple of items to change, but I was forced to leave everything behind. Not only did I lose my son, but I lost my house in 1 week, and I was told to show up to court 2 weeks later to prove my innocence or to face my consequences. So I ended up going to court, and based on all the evidence that the judge saw, they threw out the protection order because it was completely fabricated. None of it was true. However, the damage was already done. I was already thrown out of my home. I lost my son, and then they slapped me with a temporary parenting plan, which required me to pay her $6,000 a month in undifferential support, based off a financial documentation that she provided to the court saying I made X amount of dollars, and it was completely false. They had calculated my earnings completely wrong, but even if it was correct, the amount of support they were requesting was just absurd. On top of that, they only allowed me to see my son 2 hours a week, because the protection order was not held up. She started making accusations in court saying that I didn't know how to take care of my son, and if I was left alone with my son for 2 hours, he would die, which obviously led to them having me get supervised visits. I had to pay for a guardian ad litem. In my first visit, I ended up doing it at a friend's house because I was homeless at the time, couldn't afford to get a place with the amount of support and taking care of all the family bills like the mortgage, the utilities, insurance, car payment, as well as paying her under differential support on top of that. In the first hour of my visit, the guardian ad litem asked me, why am I here? And I was like, what do you mean? She goes, well, you seem like a very capable father. You know your son pretty well. You don't seem like you need supervised visits. Why are you here? So I explained to her the situation. She said, well, I'm going to go back to court and let them know that, supervised visits isn't necessary. One of the hardest parts for me was, while this all was going on, my son was facing a lot of issues with his health because of his mother's neglect. Now, I say this because my son has a lot of, special needs and a lot of challenges. But one of the things that he didn't have any health issues that required him to be hospitalized. Now, in the first 3 months of him being away from me, he was hospitalized about 5 times. Sometimes for a couple of days, sometimes for about a week. And the whole time I'm telling the courts, hey, my son's in danger. He's not being taken care of. I need more time with my son, and only time I got to see him most of the time was while he was in the hospital. And every time I went to the hospital, my ex-wife would basically tell security, oh, he's not supposed to be here. I have a court order. He's only allowed this visits and all this. But all of it was lies. I mean, anytime my son was in the hospital, in the court order, I was allowed to be there all throughout the entire time. But she would get me kicked out of the hospital. I'd have to call the social worker of the hospital and get back in. She had tried to run me over a couple times on visit exchanges. I had police reports, all of this going on, and nothing was changed. Now, I think the hardest part for me to deal with was the fact that I'm sitting here telling you this story today. However, when I was going through it all, everyone I knew had that doubt. If I told them this story, they thought I was crazy. They didn't believe me. I had to face it alone. A lot of fathers are doing exactly that right now. They're presumed guilty unless they're proven innocent. So they're automatically guilty. Society in a whole judges men this way. It happened to Johnny Depp 2016 when all this first started. He was automatically accused. Now there's this outrage, which is awesome because, it's bringing light to a situation that's going on across America for decades. The sad part is all this outrage is for a celebrity that has the means to tell his story. Where's the outrage with all the fathers that are homeless or in jail or incarcerated because they aren't able to have a voice to speak out. People automatically presume their guilt, even though they're 100% innocent. And I'm hoping with Johnny Depp's trial and people following me that this awareness is spread out and people realize that men are victims. And due to that, children become the victims as well. We have kids that are growing up without fathers because of a broken court system. And it was hard for me because, like I said, I handled it alone. For a long time, I stood by myself. I was fortunate. I have a friend that I've known since 9/11 in 2001. We met. I've known her for a while. After coming to a point where I was forced by the court to pay $15,000 up front or threatened to be thrown in jail, I had to flee the state. When I did that, everyone I knew here in Washington thought I was a deadbeat dad. They already assumed the situation. I was a deadbeat dad. I didn't want to take care of my son. I fled the state. And they didn't know the true story. I was living out of my car in the middle of winter at a rest stop. It was 30 degrees. And sleeping in my car in the morning, I'd go to 24-hour fitness, shower, change, go to work for 12 hours, and repeat the cycle over and over until I got to that point where the court forced my hand. I knew I had to leave. Most people don't understand. What's a father going to do to fight for their child sitting in jail? It's not going to benefit the child. So I made the decision to leave, and fortunately my friend, she told me to come back to Vegas, and she helped me get back on my feet, supported me, one of the only people in my life that actually supported me. That was the hardest thing to face as a man, knowing that most people thought you were guilty. You know, I don't know how a lot of fathers deal with the stress. If it wasn't for this woman that helped me, I probably would have done a lot of things different, and it would not have been good for my son. I'm not going to lie. When I left Washington, I was the one that was thinking about going to my ex-wife's house and putting a bullet in her head. But I knew that wasn't the way to do it because my son would need me. And so I made the choice to leave and knew that with the way she was neglecting my son, that eventually CPS would step in and take my child from her, which did happen. In 2017, in May, I got a phone call from Child Services, and they had basically told me that my son was in a foster home, that my ex-wife had tried to order a couple do not resuscitate orders on him, and basically the hospital told her no, so she went to another one, and the other hospital told her no, and so finally the hospitals both talked to each other and said, hey, this isn't normal. A mom shouldn't be ordering a DNR request for their child that isn't that medically fragile. On top of that, she was trying to put a trach in his throat, which was not necessary as well, in order to make him more medically fragile. So they finally took him away, and the CPS asked me if I could set up a place for him to come down to Vegas. Basically, what they said is if I could find health care for him and a place to live in Vegas, they'd ship him down to me. Now, granted, I had a bench warrant going on in Washington, but I told CPS that I planned to come back and fight for him. And the reason I did that is my son goes to Seattle Children's Hospital, and he has a team of doctors. And for me to bring him to Las Vegas would basically hinder his health care. And so I made the choice to come back with the bench warrant on my head and plead to the court to allow me an opportunity to have my child. When I came back, I did exactly that. In 2017, went in front of the judge. I told him for one, I couldn't afford the $6,000 a month in child support, and he agreed. He thought that was pretty ridiculous. Reduced my child support to $800 a month and $300 for back support, and told me that as long as I stayed current with that, payment that I could have visitations with my child. They still refused to give me my son. He was in foster care. Instead, they had me go through what they call a dependency case, where mom and I both get visitation simultaneously. We both have to follow the orders of the court and the department, the social services department, and whoever was the optimum parent would end up getting my son. Now, granted, I keep in mind I had done nothing to lose my son except being a man. That's really the only reason I did not have my son. And so I did what the court said, and that went on for 2 years with very hostile exchanges. The woman that I'm with now and her 2 stepchildren moved up to Washington with me, so we could basically care for Eric. And even when they were on exchanges, she put her kids in danger as well as my own son. Outbursts like throwing my son on the floor at the police station where we did exchanges. My son's non-mobile, so putting him on a dirty lobby floor because she doesn't want to hand him to me. Crazy stuff like that. Screaming and yelling at me and running outside of the police department. Actually trying to run me over in front of my other kids. Things like this, and nothing happened. They continued to do this farce of a exchange, and it wasn't until 2 years later they finally realized, oh, maybe she's not stable. We're going to give him to her father. So May 2019, I actually got physical custody of him, which allowed me to have him all week long, and then he would go to weekend visits with the mom, even though she had not performed any of her parental task as requested by the court. They still allowed her to have these visitations, and I still feared for his safety every single time. She would do things like not give him the medication he was supposed to, not feed him properly, sending him to emergency, and there was nothing wrong with him, trying to make claims that he was abused, and all types of ridiculous incidents that we had to deal with on a weekly basis. It was a nightmare. So when I finally was shot, believe it or not, it was a relief. I was able to finally tell this story. I was finally able to have my son on my own, and he didn't have to go to visitations with this crazy person. I didn't have to fear for his own safety. But you'd think the story is ended. It'd be a happy ending. But the reason I'm sitting here today is I want people to realize I still don't have custody of my son. I'm still fighting a corrupted court system that, yes, I have physical custody of him, but I do not have legal custody. I'm still fighting with family court to get legal custody with him. There's fathers everywhere in America going through this right now. So please tune in for more and follow Johnny Depp's story, follow my story, and look into what's going on here in America and help me be a voice for those fathers who can't. I appreciate you guys tuning in this week. I'll see you guys next time, and remember, if life knocks you down, it can't keep you down. Baron B. Lee. Thank you.